Welcome to Courtney on Health, brought to you by MalcolmPresents.com, a streaming service that produces its own shows that is heard no other place. Anyway, welcome, guys. Welcome, Courtney. Welcome, Maxine.
Welcome, Malcolm, and welcome, Courtney. It's a lovely day here in the New York part of the world. I don't know what the LA part of the world is like, but it's
LA's fine, a bit overcast, but in the 70s.
Okay, so we have sun in the 70s, so
I know.
Anyway, Max,
so I'm doing, here we go. So again, hi, Courtney and Malcolm, which I already said. Welcome to Courtney on Health, a Zoomcast podcast series, which focuses on one's overall well-being with tips on nutrition and exercise given by Courtney Gravenese, registered dietitian with a Master of Science in Nutrition and Applied Physiology. Courtney is an experienced nutritional and health consultant in the New York metro area and beyond. We always go where beyond,
beyond.
It's universal, and she will help guide you on a path to wellness and health. So, grilling season is upon us, and it's time to get. It's right. It's warm, and people have started already. People grill in the winter also, so it's not just this, but so it's all year round kind of. But it's time to get the grill warmed up because most people kind of start now, and the barbecue started. We all love having like burgers, hot dogs, chicken, some grilled veggies, steak, and of course shrimp on the barbie. But is there a hidden issue lurking in the fire? There are chemicals in meat cooked at high temperatures that are a cancer risk. According to the National Cancer Institute, heterocyclic amines, HCAs, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, are chemicals found when muscle meat, including beef, pork, fish, or poultry, is cooked using higher temperature methods. And that would be grilling or frying or anything directly over a flame. In laboratory experiments, HCAs and PAHs have been found to be mutagenic. That is, they cause changes in DNA that may increase the risk of cancer. While grilling is a great way to prepare food, what are some tips on how to minimize both PAH and HCA? That's the question. And Courtney is going to give us some important info on grilling in the summertime or anytime. And how we can, get through this myriad of words I can't pronounce. So
anyway. You did quite well. You did quite well.
I got on.
You did.
That's my 6 months of experience in doing podcasts now. All right, go ahead.
So, by the way, I am a year-round griller, so I get it. So I like to grill my food. So I wanted to get ahead. I know Memorial Day is not this coming weekend, but the week after. But every year, I feel like, because, if it bleeds, it leads in our new, in everything. So it's the drama surrounding grilling. So I wanted to get a head start and certainly present the facts of what we know about both heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And from this point forward, folks, we're just going to refer to them as PAHs and HCAs so that we don't have to do that.
PAHs, I like that, PAHs.
So what they are, how they're formed, and what the research shows us, and the best ways to just minimize a chance of consuming more than what the body could or should be handling any of these. So grilling is such a wonderful way to prepare food. It is a relatively low-fat way to prepare foods. It's accessible to many people. So I don't want to be a fear monger of grilling things. So it's really more presenting the facts, which and minimizing those risks. So just like you said, what research has shown with regard to both of these is that these are chemical compounds that are formed either in the case of HCAs, where the meat itself, so consider it sort of a layer, when flames hit or that heat hits that layer of amino acids. So it's mostly in protein. In fact, it's almost entirely in protein-based foods, animal-based foods. When heat hits those amino acids, this compound is created. So think about that dark browning, that charring side. The PAs are a little bit different in that, yes, it's mostly going to be, the meats that you just mentioned, including fish and poultry for that matter. But it also includes things like exhaust fumes, cigarette fumes that you might inhale, or fumes or smokes in general that almost attach to the food while they're being cooked. So they're a little bit different in that, if you think about the HCAs, there's actually a layer of that charring that is formed that creates these compounds. And in the case of the PAs, it's either in the smoking process or those fumes that are attaching to the meat, or in two other examples, it could be fumes that you inhale, anything combustible, smoke, fumes, etc. Well, the reason why I bring that up is that makes research studies really, really complicated to do, because it's almost impossible to tease out specifically exposure to just PAs in food supply only. So I do want to bring that up, but there are very, reputable agencies, including, the American Cancer Institute of Research, like you mentioned, the NCI. We've got all of these organizations that have looked at this for a long time. So it's worth knowing what they found and what we can do about it. So slight differences between the two of them. When we're talking about high heat, you said it, Maxine, it can be grilling, it could be frying, it can be exposure to hot metal. So think about a very hot pan. So searing could, in theory, create
Even
that
cast
in
iron?
either of these.
A cast iron pan?
So yes, it's heat.
I
It's
use them a lot, that's
above
why.
300 degrees, which if you're anybody who cooks, 300 degrees in the world of grill is pretty low. That's not a very high temperature. So before you say, forget it, I'm done, there's nothing left to eat, I'm going to die no matter what it is. There are many, many ways for us to, reduce our exposure to these and reduce how they're formed. So before we get there, it's important that you understand that the HCAs and our PAs only have the potential of damaging DNA and becoming carcinogenic only after being metabolized by certain enzymes in our bodies. So this is important to remember, because it bolsters what we talk about a lot on this show, which is get that army going of antioxidants, polyphenols, all these wonderful things, vitamins, minerals that actually can fight that process. Get your stores up of all of those different foods, and you minimize how much those two compounds can actually be metabolized in the body to cause those DNA mutations and potentially become carcinogenic. So it's not as if you eat this and your your DNA is going to mutate. It's just what has been shown, and it's important to know that there are certain things that will dial down that process, and there are certain things that will dial up that process. So hopefully that sort of pulls people in from the ledge of like, well, what's there left to eat if I can't, grill food
Maybe
anymore?
the alcohol will kill it all off, and just have some martinis with
See?
with your
There you
burgers.
go.
Burgers and martinis usually are not the thing that go together, but who knows?
Yeah. So as you can imagine, those enzymes, that metabolic process is going to vary greatly among individuals, right? Depending on what their health situation is, what their diet.
Max, there's nothing like hamburgers, French fries, and a cold beer.
Yeah, cold beer, that goes with beer. That's the thing.
Yes.
Hot dogs and beers, burgers and beers, but shrimp on the Barbie, you might want to go with a cocktail.
Right. So the shrimp that you're talking about, so even though the research seems to suggest that both of these can be created in any animal food, whether it be from fish or whether it be poultry, the data seems to suggest that they are created in greater amounts in red meat. And what the organizations consider red meat, just so folks know, that is beef, that is pork, that is lamb. It is all of those. So the PAs and the HCAs are created in a greater amount in red meat but they are created in, can be created in poultry and in seafood as well, just in smaller amounts. So when you think about, your intake of food, we talk about minimizing, it doesn't mean eliminating, but maybe minimizing how much red meat you consume on a weekly basis. And there's different, if you talk to different organizations or read different literature, you're going to hear a different amount. But one organization in particular, the American Institute of Cancer Research, suggests that we keep our red meat intake to no more than 18 ounces a week, which, is basically 3 6-ounce servings. So for some folks, that's going to be a big departure from their usual. For others, it might seem like, oh, that's not so bad. I can do that. That's reasonable to me. But that seems to be where the bulk of the data is leaning in terms of a safe amount of, if you are somebody who's an omnivore, a safe amount of red meat to eat.
Yeah, Brazilian steakhouses though, or you could probably eat one meal and it'll last 3-4 months because they're just coming around. If you're a beef lover, man, that's the place. But yeah, just you got to be careful, what you're choosing. But most people, I think, they like the burgers and the dogs that like, and then there's other good, steak and other things you could do. And some people like it charred, and you just can't say,
Right.
hey, well, according to the National Cancer Institute,
No,
hate to put a burden on your Memorial Day parade, but you shouldn't have that charred, meat to that.
No, nor, quite frankly, nor should you, because unless, again, people are coming from different viewpoints, right? There's some folks who might be listening who's like, this is non-impactful to me because I don't eat any meat at all, period. But many people do. So I think it's important to understand, what they might be, reading about, and that you don't have to completely shun, grilling and barbecuing. This is not meant to be barbecue buzzkill, right? This is meant to be, okay, these are the kinds of things you should know about, and the kinds of tricks that you can, do to, minimize how many of these compounds are actually formed when you cook. So many, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, what about veggies? Can you grill them and not have, you can grill pepper, onions, all sorts of things on a skewer. How is that? Is that affected at all by this? Or is it just absolutely the meat and the muscle?
Very, very little. So remember, we said that particularly the HCAs, those are high heat in direct contact or flame. So think of that charring process with amino acids. So because vegetables have either none or very little protein content to them, they are at, they're essentially, no risk, whatsoever. Now, what I was unable to find is if you have something like, regular tofu, that is protein. And if it happens to have a very oily base on it, right, and you grill that up, that oil creates the flame, you create the smoke. Is there any level of these PAHs on there? And there's nothing out there right now. And quite frankly, it's splitting hairs. Like I said, I don't want the message to be, this is, a horrible way to eat. It's know what these are. This is what we're talking about when we hear about them this time of year, because like you said, grilling is kicking up. It's very popular this time of year. So veggies and probably tofu, very, very little risk. I thought it was worth noting though, if you think about the way we eat, I certainly wouldn't put somebody, this wonderful, think about what barbecues and grilling is, right? It's communal, it's family, it's friends, it's getting people together. There's so much positive about it. You don't want to be a wet blanket about it. I would look at this, and I do look at this through sort of my research lens and say, high heat, including like hot metal, like a griddle, and foods that have been cooked for very, very long times. So, in terms of well done, that's the way I want you to think about it. Well, if you think about fast food burgers, right? Their fast food restaurants are unable, they can't cook to order. All those burgers have to be well done, and they are cooked in a high heat. They are cooked on a hot griddle. So that is an example, a classic example of, something that, I'm not saying something that folks don't already know, right? We shouldn't be eating fast food burgers, on any kind of frequent basis, but that is an example of, high heat, well done, and exposure to potentially both of these compounds.
Right.
Well,
So
just
what-
a question that I've always liked my toast well done, sort of like almost on the burn side. And I've been told, well, when you burn the toast, it's no good. It shouldn't be. Is that part of that same philosophy?
No, because these two compounds, the PAS and the HCAs, are not formed on, your toast may be burnt and you may be eating like, some just ash of burnt carbohydrate, but there's no creation of these two compounds. It's really, the foods that we've spoken about in a very specific process. So that exposure to the flame, that exposure to a hot fry oil, that exposure to a very hot metal. So those are the circumstances under which these two compounds are created, again, in protein, proteinous foods. You don't have to, if you like your toast that way, fine. But, one thing about, we talked about cancer risk with regard to two of these compounds, but there's actually a very interesting research study that came out, the British Medical Journal came out not too long ago, that looked at specifically the PAS, so this polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and their association with rheumatoid arthritis. So again, so the study it looked at the PAS from all sources. So this is not saying just from food, it's all sources, but historically we hear about these two compounds being associated with cancer risk. This is the first time, at least to my knowledge, I've heard it associated with any kind of incidence of rheumatoid arthritis.
So that's good. There's always great info when you start researching, once you know that you should be researching it. So what can one do to reduce the amounts created and reduce their possibility of having to have meat that's charred and you don't really want to do that? What's the best way? How do we get around that?
All right, so listen, I'm going to give you the list. I have to give you the list because this list has been around for as long as I've been in practice, but I'm also going to put my realistic hat on, and I got to say that some of these are not really based in reality. I'm going to say them, but I'm going to say I can't see many folks taking advantage of this. But nonetheless, so you want to try and avoid cooking meats well done. So because the longer they're exposed to that heat and the more the meat cooks, the greater the concentration of both of those compounds. So that prolonged cooking time should be avoided. Now, one of the suggestions that is given is to perhaps microwave a steak first before it goes on the grill. Now, you guys know that I'm not a chef. I'm a decent home cook. I'm a bit of a foodie. I don't eat a whole lot of red meat, but I'm pretty sure that throwing a really good steak in the microwave and then putting it on a grill is a ginormous no thank you, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I can't even look. You're telling me this and I'm looking at my note too. It has microwave before you cook. I'm like,
but
how to kill your steak before you
exactly how to kill your steak in less than a minute. However, you could put now, and I wouldn't use the microwave at all, period. However, I have seen people, not for things like chicken breast, because chicken breasts cook very, very quickly. So I don't think you need to pre-cook them. So you could, if you have like bone-in, skin-on chicken breast, I have seen people put them in an oven. You cook them a little bit in the oven, and then they spend less time on the grill. I think that's more for folks, they just don't want the chicken to dry out all that much, and less with regard to the formation of these compounds. But that is certainly something you could do. If you are a steak eater, so not microwave, and I'm not telling people to go out and buy gizmos, because up until 5 years ago, I didn't even know what a sous vide was. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of one. The chefs use these a lot. They're the ones who put the meat in. I know it seems weird, in these in basically a water bath. It's in a plastic container first. It holds it, and then you just finish the meat on the grill. That makes sense to me. So if you are somebody who really enjoys your occasional steak, this would, first of all, it's a great way to cook it because it'll never overcook your food, and it minimizes that cooking time. So that would be something that I would suggest over the microwaving of the food before you put it
What is
on.
it like, freeze dry? I mean, you put it in this bag and it kind of locks it sealed?
That's right. So you would close it up, and then
Right.
you submerge it in a water bath.
Mhm.
And then this is the heating unit in here, and then that goes in that water bath, and it cooks it to the exact temperature that you want. So if you love your meat medium rare, you program it for that. It holds it there for a certain, it won't hold us there endlessly, but it'll hold it there for a good couple of hours, and then you can finish it on the grill, which is a great combination. So I would highly suggest that over that microwave suggestion. But
Right.
again, it's not cheap, but again, you just want to minimize that how much time it's being spent on the grill. Continuously turning the meat.
Mhm.
So don't let that char really build up. I'm not saying no char at all, right? And the reality
Right.
is, even if you eat some char,
You
just like
love
we
the
said
char.
before,
The
you
char
want
is
the
the
char,
thing.
right?
You want the
So
char.
maybe don't eat, and most people don't. Most people aren't, eating grilled food every single night. So if you're eating this occasionally, I would almost say don't sweat it. If you're somebody who grills more often, these tips might make a little bit more sense to you. So continuously turning it, maybe minimize the char if you want. We do know that marinating foods for about 30 minutes in some kind of acid base. So I think about maybe more fish, chicken, things like that would lend themselves a little bit better to this. That marinade, because it's a couple of things. Research seems to suggest it's either the antioxidants that are in that marinade. So think about herbs and spices that might be dialing down that formation, or simply that marinade base that's what's getting charred and not the protein on the meat. So, but lots of people use marinades for a lot of their summertime grilling. So first of all, it tastes great, and it'll minimize some of the formation of these.
But what type of time period are we talking about? Let's say, are we talking about this will build up in a matter of years, of decades? If you're eating this type of food, let's say 2-3 times a week, how long will it take before you develop something?
Nobody can answer that. And the reality is they don't even know if it will, because there is no absolute that if you eat these foods, you will absolutely get some type of cancer. What we do know that is fairly consistent is, grilled or not, there seems to be a correlation between excessive red meat intake and colon cancer, for example. That's a little bit clearer. What's fuzzier is what you're just asking is, okay, if I have grilled food 3 times during the summer, does that mean, I'm going to have, colon cancer a couple of years from now? Nobody can answer that. These are all just, there appears to be a link between populations of people who consume large amounts of grilled food, but even then there's a lot of variability, because individuals have different processes and they metabolize foods differently. When you look at the animal studies, again, we can only look at animal studies so much. So the animal studies, and they're given these animals huge amounts of these 2 compounds, way more than any human would probably ever consume. And in those animal studies, they saw increased, in this one, a couple of them were like, one was breast cancer, one was colon cancer. But the reality is, we as humans are probably not eating that level. So as long as, again, we're not eating charred food every single day, most of us are probably going to be just fine, and and not have to worry about these very high levels of these 2 compounds in our bodies.
Can you
Well,
remove the char? Can you remove the char from, it's one of the tips I see is removing
Yep.
charred
Yes.
portions of meat. I mean, just slicing it off. I mean, what?
Yes, you certainly could. Now, there's another one that I have to ask myself, is that a realistic tip for somebody? The answer is yes, Maxine. You could certainly remove the char, and that would remove the amount of both of these, both any PAs that might be there and the HCAs. But people eat grilled foods, just like we just said, because they like that char. So if you're removing the joy from the food that you're eating, I just, you know, many times I think that I understand they're well-meaning tips, but I think there needs to be a layer of, you know, reasonableness and reality. So I do think trimming the fat from foods that are particularly fatty is a great tip, because not only are you removing, you know, I'm not saying all of the fat, that's what gives it a lot of flavor, but trimming some of it. And what you've done by trimming that fat is you're reducing the amount of flare-ups, because that fat on your grill will go down, whether you do charcoal or whether you do a gas grill, and it creates these flares. So those of you who grill, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So if your food is being constantly bombarded with those flares, with the flames, you're more likely to potentially create some of these two compounds. So trim some of the fat, it's all good, fewer flare-ups, and you've minimized exposure.
Right. What I can't see is, you know, when people do chicken and they take the skin off, roast chicken or fried chicken, that's the most, I mean, I know that's the most dangerous part of it, you know, with the fat, but that's the most delicious part of it to me.
Well, everyone has different, you know, things that they like.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of having the skin unless it's really, really charred well. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and it's, you know,
and I use the word charred. See, I'm like,
they're not burnt, charred, different, right?
the skin,
Yeah.
right? The skin. When you go to these, you know, barbecue places, and there's certain parts of the country where barbecue is life. I mean, you go
Right.
down south, you go to Texas, it's part of their diet. I mean, they have fantastic barbecue places. I mean, if you're
That's
gonna
right.
get some good Q, Bryant's in Kansas City, I got to taste that myself. It was incredible. And
I know. It's very, very tasty, and man, they know how to do it right down there. That's for sure. So, but you know, it's not about taking it all away. It's about, you know, just an awareness of like, you know, maybe I shouldn't be having that as much. Some of these tips in terms of, you know, the cooking, the herb and the marinade one, I think, is a great one. So any kind of herb combination. Most recently, there was a study that looked at rosemary and ginger in particular, and there seems to be something specific about those two herbs. Maybe it's the very high antioxidant content on it. So it's basically your army fighting any kind of, you know, potential DNA damage that, you know, the hydrocarbons or these, you know, HCAs could be doing. So those are two wonderful herbs that lend themselves nicely to most grilled foods. And then of course, balancing out, you guys know I'm very realistic, right? You know, I would say minimize your fast food burgers, because those are a classic example of how those two compounds can be formed. Minimize those. Certainly enjoyed your grilled foods. Maybe use some of the tips we spoke about today, but even beyond that, bolster your diet, bolster your health army with fruits and vegetables and the foods that have so many of these compounds that can fight the mutagenic properties of these two compounds. And that is a far more, you know, realistic approach to, you know, managing this than saying, okay, don't grill again, or throw your steak in a microwave. Please don't.
It's like my mom would say everything in moderation, right? You know, everything in moderation.
Do you realize after we air this show that McDonald's stock is going to go down 10%?
No, it's not
I don't
even
know about that,
McDonald's. I can't
All the fast
imagine
food.
I can't imagine Angelino's not going in for that In-N-Out burger, man. Are you kidding me? It's like,
Actually, that's my favorite burger, the In-N-Out
that is
burger.
the best. It's fast food places, and I don't frequent them hardly at all. But if I'm in LA on occasion, I will, you know, grab an In-N-Out burger, you know.
Well, you know what they say, if you like the taste of it, it's either immoral, illegal, or fattening.
It's all of those, I think, In-N-Out burgers, and I've been going to LA since I'm 8, so we're 7. That's a long time, decades. I still have not gone to Pink's.
You haven't gone to Pink's?
I haven't gone to Pink's. It's a hot dog place, very famous, and it's in.
That's funny.
I have
Oh,
not been
Pink's?
there. Pink's. It's called Pink's.
Yeah, on the wall, it's You
It's
see all
used.
the actors,
Right,
you know,
it's
autograph
like
pictures.
all the celebs go there. Yeah, they'll go there, and it's open late, and it's so I'm maybe next time I'm out there, I'll be out
That's like
there.
the Nathans of Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's an institution actually, but it's really cool.
But speaking about Nathans, you realize I must be gone. I mean, during the summertime and during when I was in high school, I think I ate a hot dog every day
Hmm.
at Nathan's because the bus where I had to take the bus stopped there, and I had to transfer buses right on the corner of Nathan's on
Mhm.
Stillwell Avenue and 14th Street.
Be
Yep.
hard to avoid it.
And I think when I was a kid, it was like about 25 cents a hot dog.
Right. Well, yeah. If my family came in from LA, but right by Passover, or even if it was Passover and they weren't supposed to, they would go from JFK to Nathan's. And then they'd start Passover after the Seder. It was, even though it was probably technically Passover, and nope, I don't care. Sorry, God, we're having a hot dog. That's it.
Anyway, guys,
That's it.
on that note, we've reached the end of our show.
Ah.
Can you imagine?
No,
There it is.
we're having such good information from Courtney on this stuff. So yeah.
Hopefully,
So
hopefully helpful.
okay, so
Okay.
you could follow, you'll get more information from Courtney on social media about it. So if you go follow her on her Facebook page, Courtney on Health, and on Instagram and TikTok at CLG Wellness. That's the at CLG Wellness. She also has the website, CourtneyGravenese.com. And for shows in the past, MalcolmPresents.com has shows. I have the ManyShadesOfGreen.com shows posted. And here we are at the end. Here's the tagline. It's been Courtney on Health, Smart Sound Nutrition, Strong Safe Fitness, and we'll catch you again next time.
As I always say,
Happy
heard
grilling.
on MalcolmPresents.com.
And also the podcast on all the podcast apps, right?
Right, whatever they are.
Wherever you find them.
Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you can look up Courtney on Health. Okay. All
Okay.
right,
Anyway,
guys.
thanks a lot, guys.
Bye.
See you next week.
See you next time.
You just killed my Memorial Day. Bye.